we have to clean our glassware. That's right, clean them. I know. It's not the funnest part of the job, but the prep work always makes your projects easier later. When I'm not rushing to make another DIY video, I really like to take my time and properly clean my glass. For these, I'm using this Dawn Power Wash spray right here. 7th Generation is another brand that I really like to use. Use whatever you feel works best for you. There really isn't a right or wrong way to clean these off. A really good tip for whenever you're working with anything that's glass is to plop on some gloves, my friends. This is going to protect the glass from the natural oils that you have on your skin. If you have oils or debris left on your glass, when you start to paint or apply a transfer, it is possible that over time it will slowly start to come back off. So this is all just a good precaution to make sure your DIYs last. I took a paper towel to dry them off. You can also use a microfiber cloth, that works really well also. And truth be told, sometimes I skip all of this and just use some pure alcohol to clean my glass. I found this piece at a local thrift store. It was only $1 and we're gonna need to paint it up. When it comes to picking paints for glass, you wanna make sure that you pick something that works well with glass to save yourself time and frustration. And people, when in doubt, check the label. It will let you know if the product works well with glass. Here's a couple of my favorites. For this cool idea, we're going to be using some Waverly chalk paint, and the color is called Ballet Slipper, and we're going to add a little bit of this mica powder to it. And people, don't you be asking me no ratios in them comments. Okay, mix with love. Mix with love. I will say add a fair amount of mica powder. It takes a lot when you're mixing it with the paint for it to show up and give you that metallic glow. Whenever I'm painting on glass, I'll usually use a pouncer or a sponge to do the first layer. I've found that when I use a paintbrush, there are streaks and it can be really frustrating trying to build up a layer. The pouncer actually allows me to get a nice coverage with the first coat. And then if I find that the paint didn't self-level out enough to where it looks really smooth, I'll then come back in on the second layer with the paintbrush for a more even coverage smooth coat. But most of the time, this paint, even though it's Waverly and it's not an artesian paint that costs a whole bunch of money, it levels out pretty well. On the second coat, I'm going to add some Mod Podge in with the mica powder and the paints. This is going to help us completely skip having to seal over this another time. This way our sealant is in the second coat, and we're also going to have a little bit more of a sheen with that metallic finish. You can add whatever little embellishments or accents to decorate your bottle with this beautiful metallic paint. It's completely up to you. I kept it super simple so you can take this idea and remix it at home to make beautiful pieces that you love. Next time you're in Dollar Tree looking for some amazing glassware to do some DIYs to, grab yourself 2 of these joints right here. And while you're at it, pick one of these up. And since we're splurging, grab one of these too. The cool thing about these candle holders is that they have a very similar look and different heights. So when we place these little floral pieces right on the top, it's going to give them a very similar look, helping them to create a set. You can obviously hand paint this if you want to. I've been in a spray painty mood, people, so I wanted to use some of this Coastal Sage in the matte. I'm loving this color as well, to give these a nice coat. And since the floral piece had a lot of little bits that were kind of separate, I decided to wait to attach the pieces until after they were spray painted. For the attachment, I'm going to use my favorite Gorilla Glue gel. People, use whatever glue you feel works best on glass. This just works best for me, and that's why I chose to use this. You can absolutely seal over this, use some Rust-Oleum spray paint in the matte, and people, I'm absolutely loving this color right now. What do you think? Grab one of Dollar Tree's smaller mason jars for this lantern decor piece. We're not going to need the top, so we can go ahead and pop that off. And we're already off to a great start. Use any planter you would like for this part. I happen to have one of these square galvanized pieces, and I'm going to be using that. I grabbed it from Dollar Tree, as well as one of these Dollar Tree candle holders. Now, I've already painted this up and I have a transfer on it. Mind all of it, okay? Because we're not going to see it. We're just using it to be able to set our mason jar lantern on top of as its little stool. Floral foam would do the trick as well. To create the lantern look, we're gonna need one of these LED hanging lamps from Dollar Tree. I love how these fit perfectly right into the top of these mason jars, and they have the little button on the top so they're easy to turn on and off. I want to add a little something something onto the mason jar, so I grabbed one of these stencils that I picked up off Amazon. You can get them in a pack. I even think I have some down in my Amazon affiliate link in the description box. I'm trimming it down to the size that I need, and I'm gonna grab some painter's tape and cut a whole bunch of little sections, because as you can imagine, it is not going to stay on here easily. So we're going to need to make sure that we're taping this down as much as possible, because it is a plastic stencil. You can obviously create your own so this way they stick on here, and that would probably work better, but I'm a rebel and we're going to use this plastic one. I know this multi-surface paint sticks amazingly to glass, so I'm just going to go ahead and use that. And I've had a lot of people say that they can't stencil. And a little tip, I do have a how-to stencil video. I can link that down below. A little tip, it doesn't matter what you use to apply your paint. I want you to understand the best way to stencil is to make sure you offload most of your paint to where whatever you're using, whether it's a paintbrush, whether it's a sponge, it is practically dry. If it is almost dry and there is no paint, you're not going to suffer from all that smushing underneath of the stencil, creating a lot of bleed through. Since the jar is circular, I'm also placing my finger very gingerly in different sections that are popping up on the stencil. So this way I make sure that as I'm applying my little pouncer, that the paint is going right over the stencil and not bleeding through. Also, it's a good idea to always remember that you want to keep your glass clean whenever you're working with it. You'll notice here I don't have gloves or anything like that, and I didn't clean my glass, and that's because I'm mostly just keeping the pieces for me and creating them for the ideas for you for the video. You want to make sure if you're doing this at home, you keep your glass clean and you wear gloves so you don't get any of those finger oils onto the glass underneath your paints. A lot of tappity, and later we have a beautiful stencil on our mason jar. I am shoving some greenery in our galvanized bucket piece. Pop whatever you would like in here to finish it up. Also glue whatever you want to glue down. Use your E6000, your Gorilla Glue Gel. I have things just sitting in here for staging purposes for the video to introduce the idea to you at home. And I hope you love it as much as I do. I was inspired by this piece I seen online at Kohl's, and I'm thinking to myself, I think we can recreate this using these bottles at Dollar Tree. Grabbed my frosted glass spray paint that I had on hand. Use whichever spray paint you would like and then give it a nice coat. As you can see, I didn't go too heavy on the bottom because we have to tint it going up. But the top is beautiful and I am happy with that. You can do as many coats as you like. I just did one. For the translucent blend, I'm gonna take some of this Dragonfly glaze I picked up from Hobby Lobby and mix it with a little bit of blue acrylic paint. You can do this several different ways. This is just one that I'm sharing today. And I also want to mention that if you use a chalk paint, it's going to give you more of a solid coverage. Mixing it in with this glaze, the acrylic will be more translucent. I don't want to see any brush strokes on this. So a way to avoid that is by getting a pouncer and gently tap in all over your piece. Now this is going to take several coats because it is extremely translucent, but I know that using a pouncer is going to give me a nice even coat from the start not having to deal with fixing any brush strokes on my glass. And in case you're wondering, I put 3 coats on this joint, okay? While it's drying, I grabbed myself a little white, I guess this piece of cardboard I kind of had laying around, to do a rough sketch. Since I'm using my phone to record, I can't necessarily keep looking at the picture, so having a rough sketch right in front of me like this, at least kind of how I want the branches, is going to help me go along with painting. Even though we have like a layer over our glass, I'm making sure to use paints that work well with glass, like multi-surface and chalk. And the acrylics you see me have here, even though they don't work necessarily well with glass, if you mix them with the chalk or you mix them with a multi-surface, they will tint and you will still have good adhesion onto that material. I'm going to use some of this black ink paint to mix with some brown acrylic because I didn't have any chalk or multi-surface in a dark brown. This is going to be our base for the branches. I could not have been happier with how this blue color turned out on the bottom of this glass. It's got like a nice metallic glow going on with it. I found one of the smallest round brushes that I had in my stash and did a couple paint strokes to test over on the side. If you look at the white little paper or white cardboard sitting there, and then I just tried to use my little sketch that I had there, not necessarily as an exact picture for me to copy, but kind of just a guide as how I wanted to place the branches. And this is all going to be really sped up, but it took me about an hour and a half to completely paint this glass bottle. For our flower petals, I'm going to use some of this multi-surface paint and some of this brown acrylic paint. One thing I really like to do is to blend 2 colors together whenever I'm painting something, like intermingling the 2. This kind of gives you a really cool transition between one section of the piece of art that you're creating into another. So as you're doing different strokes, it kind of gives its own individuality of each section. I hope that makes sense. So here we're creating petals. So each petal will have its own unique color variation, helping it to look a little bit more realistic. And to be able to create petals using a larger round brush and pressing down and pulling inward with each stroke will give you this appearance. When you're happy with your floral placements, go ahead and let that dry before moving on to the next part. On the Coles piece, there were little buds. So I want to recreate that in certain sections as well, just to try to keep it as close to the original as I can. And to do that, I'm just blending the 2 colors and doing 1 stroke, starting with the tip of the round brush away from where the branch is and pulling it inward. To tie those little buds into the branch, I'm taking some more of our black and brown mixture and then kind of drawing around the buds and then pulling it into the branch. You can finish up the center of your flowers however you want. There's so many different ways to be able to do that. I'm just using a dotting tool with some yellow chalk paint and just tappity tap tap tapping right on the center of that flower. Well, each one of the little flowers. When I was happy with that, I then took some more of that black and brown mixture and tapped little dots on the inside and came back in with some white and some of that light brown along the branch bits and created some highlights. If you want to seal over this, go right ahead, use whatever sealer you feel works best. I will probably wait until this is fully dry the next day and grab some clear Rust-Oleum in the mat and give it a nice spray over. These are currently my favorite glass pieces at Dollar Tree. I love how large the pieces are, as well as the raised design that we have around the entire piece. Gives a lot of room to create some DIYs and use these in different ways. I'm going to share two with you right here. First up, you're going to need to pick out a paint. I'm going to be using this letterpress gray from DIY and a pouncer to tappity tap 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 all over this glass. And in case you're ever interested in grabbing any DIY paint that you might see me use, my girl Sammy over at Unicorn Dust Designs sells it, and I keep a link down in my description box for you. I also want to remind you that it's a good idea to wear gloves whenever you're working with glass, and to make sure that you've cleaned it off thoroughly using whatever best practices work for you. A lot of times if I'm going to resell pieces, I'll make sure to take some rubbing alcohol, clean everything down, and I'll wear gloves. This way I don't have any oils from my finger sticking between the glass and the paint. You don't want to have any debris or anything on your glass before you paint. It can always cause adhesion issues later. It only took 2 coats to get these completely covered to where I was happy. And please keep in mind that if you go to paint glass, not all paint is created equal, and you want to use a good chalk paint or a good multi-surface paint, so this way everything's going to stick thoroughly. I love using pouncers for the most part on glass. They give really good coverage and you don't have to do so many layers, but when you get to the top, you always got to suck that up and grab a paintbrush to really get in those creases. These are absolutely stunning, and as you can see, just adding some paint on here with those raised sections, really it gives you a nice high-end look for a couple minutes of work. If you want to kick these up a notch, grab you some Dixie Belle gilding wax and go around those raised edges. It's going to just make everything pop. However, today, I'm always telling everyone if you don't have Dixie Belle gilding wax, just use some paint. So today I'm going to use some paint, taking this multi-surface, tapping a little bit on my finger just like I would with the gilding wax. Sometimes I use a paintbrush. I'm going to show you that you can do the same thing with this as well and go around those raised edges. Just going to have whatever color you choose to use pop, as well as bring out those designs. You can grab you a popsicle stick or use a paintbrush like I'm about to use the side as well, and dip in a little bit of paint. Make sure it's not oversaturated, so this way you don't have a lot of clumps everywhere, practically dry, and drag it over the raised edges to make it a little bit quicker for you than using your finger. At my local Dollar Tree, they currently have the new dishware pieces out. Absolutely love the designs on these plates. And people, have you seen these new candle holders? I had to grab a couple for my stash. I absolutely love these. Got lots of ideas for them. But today we're gonna need a small plate, a large plate, and one of the candle holders so we can create a very simple and high-end tiered tray with these. What I love most about this particular idea is you literally don't have to paint or spray paint anything. You just need some glue, and the idea itself is absolutely stunning. For our attachment, I'm choosing to use Gorilla Glue Gel. By all means, use your E6000, whatever works best for you, but keep in mind there is a dent in this joint, so you're going to want to put that glue right around the edges and then allow this to dry before you put anything on it. Wanted to film it while it was drying just so you could see how beautiful and elegant this is all on its own. And then for staging purposes for you at home, I just decided to put a couple little candles and little floral bits on the top and on the bottom. I need the popular opinion in the comments, people. Do you consider mirrors glassware? Because I do, okay? I need to know. Let me know. Do you feel like it's glassware? Because sometimes I got mirror ideas and I don't know where to put them. For this particular idea, we're going to need to also grab some of these little ceramic animals from Dollar Tree. Well, this was the only one I could find today, but normally when I'm out and about and not worried about it, I find a couple of these pieces. But the elephant is my favorite, so I was really glad I came across this one. But we're not going to leave it like that. We're going to take some of this Rust-Oleum in the French blue color. It is a satin finish, so it's got a little bit of a sheen to it, and give it a nice coat. You can absolutely take some Rust-Oleum clear in the matte or satin, gloss, whatever you want to finish this up with, and give it a nice seal over. Look how beautiful this is and elegant, just sitting on top of that little mirror. For this decorative storage space idea, you're going to need to grab 2 of the smaller mason jars from Dollar Tree and 1 of these baskets. I'm really into the Dollar Tree baskets right now. Then do yourself a favor and take a minute to put both of these mason jars inside your baskets. You're going to notice that it's a little snug. The reason why I tell you to take a minute doing that is so you can figure out the size that you want to press this basket out to fit in your mason jars. Lucky for us, these baskets are pretty manipulatable. So I decided to continue to put them in and then move the basket around and create a shape that I thought would look best for this decor piece. I also decided to kind of push the basket down a little bit more, so this way the jars stood out over top of the basket. I took the center of the metal pieces out and just kept the little rings. Now, you don't have to do this part if you want to just leave your mason jars as they are. You go right ahead, but I wanted to add a little bit of color, so I took some of this ink chalk paint by Waverly and gave these a nice coat. I ended up putting 3 coats on here for good coverage, and if you want to plop a sealer on here, go ahead and put a little layer of Mod Podge over it. Absolutely won't hurt. I really just wanted to add the black on here for a little bit of color to match our basket, but you don't have to put anything on your mason jars at all. You can really do a lot with this little idea. I decided that I was going to put them in the bathroom with a little bit of greenery because it matched some of the accents that were already in the bathroom to use to hold some toothbrushes and some cotton balls. In case you didn't know, white bases make perfect backgrounds for decoupaging, especially if you're doing a napkin or some tissue paper like this. This is TDS Decoupage tissue paper. It is called Large Fancy Stamps and Labels. I'm going to just take a little bit of water on some paintbrush and carefully trace out one of the designs. Whenever you go to decoupage over paint, it's a good idea to make sure it is completely dry, just like I'm doing here, and there is no chalky residue. I'm gonna just use some Mod Podge for the medium on this and a fan brush for our application. If you're not familiar with decoupage, no worries. I do have links down in the description box for a whole playlist with tons of help for you. Go ahead and check that out. Most of the time I like to say less is more, and I apply just a small amount of medium and then press in one section to get it adhered and then continue to do the same thing. You can use different little tools to help you apply. I'm just using my finger with this paper. It's fairly easy enough to manipulate, just using your finger and pressing along the bottle. I'm not worrying too much about wrinkles. If you are, make sure you're using some cling wrap or a dry sponge to help press that out. The main reason I love using fan brushes is it's thin enough to have a small amount of medium and just go around the edges. This is really helpful whenever you're decoupaging a napkin, because on the edges it's super thin and you want to make sure that it is completely attached. It gives a really seamless look, especially if you're fraying anything and you're trying to make sure that it blends to the backgrounds. So this just helps make sure that there is a really good connection between whatever you're decoupaging and your surface. Another tip I like to share with people, if you're trying to blend around the edges, you can usually see some separation between the napkins or tissue paper, even regular paper. I like to take a pouncer or a paintbrush, even if you have a small makeup brush, and kind of get a little bit of that dry brushing going on and tappity tap 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 all around the edges, blending out into the paint. If you want to seal this up, you go right ahead. I would wait at least 24 hours to give everything a little bit of time to cure, to ensure that there is no tearing of whatever you've decoupaged onto your piece. I was lucky enough to find some of those amazing wood looking chargers at Dollar Tree and just thought this would look like such a beautiful idea for a tabletop decor piece. These little glass pieces are one of my favorite new finds at Dollar Tree, and I thought we could easily give them a little bit of love by adding some fabric and some ribbon to them and plopping in some florals. I had this little pattern in my stash, and I love how the top was frayed, so it sold me already because I wouldn't have to fray the whole piece, and just cut out a nice section to wrap around the center of our glass. Of course, I had to make the other side frayed to match the top side, so I did this painstaking task of pulling it apart. Took me about 10 minutes, but I got there eventually. My absolute favorite ribbon stuff, whatever you want to call it, from Dollar Tree is these things. Are these things. They come in all different colors and they really go with anything. Burlap, different patterns, doesn't matter. You can do all kinds of stuff. I even put them in my little floral bundles just to add some filler. Love these. I cut some off and layered them right on top of each other, and then flipped this upside down so I could attach it around the back of our piece of glass. Grab whatever kind of florals you want to pop in here. I picked these up recently at Walmart. They had a bunch of picks for like 99 cents, so I cleaned up. I'm florally challenged, so I need all the options I can get. I added a little bit of jute twine in the center here with a bow for a little bit of extra something something, and I love how easy and cute this turned out. Another easy way to use these little frosted glass cork bottles is to grab some stickers. I have these vintage pieces that I picked up from Temu, and I've been waiting to use them on a few projects, but this one in particular I thought would look super cute if we create kind of like a little junk journal section on the front of one of these glass pieces. I just picked out a couple pieces that looked like they made sense and started layering them. If you want to make sure that your design stays on your glass bottle, don't forget to seal over top of the stickers. You can use whatever sealer works best for you. I usually grab some Mod Podge, put a little layer right over the top, and let that dry, and it's good to go. If you want to reuse your glass bottles, don't put any sealer over them, and you can change out your stickers as often as you want. For this tabletop decor piece, you're going to need a large mason jar from Dollar Tree. Go ahead and remove that lid because we are not going to need it. And I actually have two ideas, which is going to require us to basically create a white base. And to do that, I'm going to just take some of this DIY paint in the White Swan and a pouncer and tappity tap 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 all over our jar. And I do want to remind everyone, it's a good idea to make sure your glass is completely clean before you paint it and to wear gloves. And that's all we're going to be doing for this, is painting it a nice solid color. You can use whatever color you want. I thought this would look really nice with the new large stems I seen recently at Dollar Tree. Check this piece out. I have seen some of these suckers go for over $10. So when I seen the large stem, I was like, we're gonna grab that up, and just plopping it in a pretty jar looks stunning. I see these pieces all the time at Dollar Tree and I never grab them because I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have to paint them. But these yellow ones, honestly, you don't need to do anything for fall. You can just shove some stuff in there, like some potpourri or some, floral pieces or whatever, take the idea and remix it. But I'm taking some of these potpourri pieces and I'm just sprinkling a little in the bottom of these jars. I also really appreciate the fact that the color is a little bit different once they get in there. Okay, you might have to poke them down a little bit to get them in there. And then look at this sucker. That looked like a dog treat to me. I was like, that looks like something Harley to eat. Now, I'll be the first person to admit I am horrible at florals and wreaths and centerpieces, all those things, okay? But I feel like I did a really good job picking things that contrasted well to pop through these yellow vases. I liked the way I could see through these. However, one I wanted to do different than two, and I had these awesome LED lights I get off Amazon, and I grabbed these because if you ever tried shoving that battery pack on the ones that you get from Dollar Tree into stuff that has small openings, yeah, it's a pain. And I love these because I can pretty much put that little battery pack in anything and conceal it. You don't even know that it's there. And yes, if you have the right battery, you can replace the batteries on these, which is another reason why I really like them. So for the third bottle, I just took some white burlap and wrapped these little fairy lights around them. And then took some of this fabric that I grabbed from Dollar Tree and cut a couple strips. So we could just wrap a piece around the neck of all three bottles, tying them together even though one was different. And I finished it off with a little button right in the center, a dovetail trim on the edges, and florals in our one bottle. Who wants to make an ice cream sundae with this beautiful glass piece? Too bad we're not making no ice cream around here, but we are going to turn this into a pretty little eye-catching piece. People, do not skip on Target's Bullseye Playground. I grabbed this stuff for $1 from there. Now, mind you, it's moss and messy and it should be free, but that's besides the point. This was also about the moment I realized I was going about this backwards because I wanted to put a bow on here. So I decided to take that stuff out. Use whatever ribbon you want, you know what I'm saying? I grabbed this from Dollar Tree and I thought the colors would really just pop out on this with what I wanted to put inside of our little decor piece. So I just sliced off a nice size and then got to business. Now, I am horrible at bows, okay? If you came for some kind of tutorial about how to make the perfect bow around here, you got the wrong channel. I shall defer you to any other content creator in the DIY community but me. And truth be told, as I'm going through this process over the last couple years, I try to use ribbon that has like the wiry pieces on the edge. So I know once I'm done struggling to make the bow, that sucker is going to hold its shape. And even just cutting little dovetails, I can't even do that right. So it's like, take two. Now it's time to grab our pile of stuff that's on the side and kind of spread it back in here. It actually works. I mean, if you've worked with the stuff, you know it works well. It just makes a mess. And then I grabbed some of this Dollar Tree. I just call this Dollar Tree mesh. I never remember the technical term. And it's literally one of my favorite things from Dollar Tree. It comes in different colors. First, I didn't remember where I purchased it, and then when I knew I got it from Dollar Tree, I bought all the colors because there's a bunch of different little color options. I think it's just a nice filler, and I like the shape of it, and I like that it doesn't have to be perfect, and it can fit into pretty much anything, no matter how you cut it up. It just adds a little something, something. Then grab whatever you want to toss on in here. And the best part about this is you can switch it up every holiday. We didn't hot glue anything on here. It is just a cute little decor piece that you can switch up for every single holiday and the colors out even throughout the season if you want to. People, I know you see these all year long at Dollar Tree, just like I do, and I could probably do an entire video on just things to do with these. Love the frosted glass. I don't like the fact that the gold is a little messy, so we're going to fix that using some of Dixie Belle's gilding wax, okay? If you don't have that, another option is some rub and buff. That will also fix this. But if you have a Dixie Belle retailer and you have access to this stuff, just grab some. You cannot go wrong with holding on to the gilding waxes at all. I have several different colors. And look how perfectly that just matches this. And it goes right on here. And you don't need to seal over this or anything. When you're happy with touching that up, and if you don't want to use gold, use whatever color. You know what I'm saying? DIY it however you want. I wanted to keep the gold. And then I grabbed these stickers. Also because, you know, they're trimmed in gold. And full disclosure, people, and I'm going to also share that with you, these stick really well. I'm not going to lie. They're really good sticking stickers. However, since our shape is kind of circular and you got to bend them, you're going to want to make sure that you seal over these immediately for them to hold their shape, or they will start to pop back off. And the reason they start to pop back off is because the sticker itself is thick. It's like got some plastic in there. It feels like it probably doesn't, but if you have these, you know what I'm talking about. They are thicker. So just seal over them to keep them against your cylinder. And because I like to share everything with y'all, you can see here about an hour after I filmed the reveal, the one side of this sticker popped off. Now, if I would have sealed that sucker on up, I would have been straight. Just because it's cheap doesn't mean it has to look cheap. And just because it's cheap doesn't mean you can't make adjustments so that way it doesn't end up being cheap. These turned out gorgeous. I wasn't kidding when I said I had several ideas for these. And yes, these are the same ones. I just took the sticker off. Okay, give me a break. I'm here to inspire and give you ideas, not go broke in the process. Waste not, want not around this joint. That's all I'm saying. Next, we're going to bring in one of Dollar Tree's rub-on transfers that look like a piece of wood. If you're lucky enough to get a hold of these, I've literally seen them one time and I grabbed what they had. I wanted to use this as a background to create little tags, basically. So I took the top of a Mod Podge bottle and traced one on the front, sharing that you can actually draw on the front of these and it's not going to affect your design. Or you can flip these over and do the same exact thing. Either way, you can use both sides to trace out a design and then cut your shape if you do not want to use the whole piece on something. But this way you're able to basically hold on to what you didn't use, and instead of just rubbing on a section and then the transfer is completely wasted. So like I said, waste not, want not around this joint. And the rest is really straightforward. You just rub and then get something sharp, okay? Because this clear stuff is definitely attached onto this, you know, faux wood design. Get something sharp and then pop off the clear piece, and there you have it. I wanted to add some little accents, so I also had these transfers laying around and just cut a couple of gold little bits to press on the outside to just kind of make it look a little bit more like a label instead of just a little circle thrown onto our candle piece here. And look at that. It really does just kind of give it a little oomph. You know what I mean? I did the same in the opposite corner up on the side, or on the opposite rounded piece, because does it really have a corner? It's a circle. I have not been lucky enough to get a hold of Dollar Tree's fall transfers yet this season, and the ones that I did have, I put them in my decoupage kits because it's more important for me to make sure you guys at home can have access to them. If your Dollar Trees aren't carrying them, I can get them for you in my decoupage kits. So off they went. I'm using this one to just cut out the word fall. And then to give you another option, I was recently sent this really cute stamp kit and thought, let's put a little leaf on here. And of course, oh no, mistakes were made. So I had to gingerly find the alignment for this stamp to press it on here to try to make sure it looked like one piece. It turned out okay. It turned out okay. But the ideas are fire, people. The ideas are fire. Just make sure your lettering isn't all jacked up like mine and your stamp isn't on the half like mine, and you'll be good to go. I love this little dessert cup from Dollar Tree, and I always think to myself, what could we DIY this into if we flip it upside down so its booty is facing us? I'm like, let's bring in some ribbon, let's tie a little bow on here, and let's bring in one of these Dollar Tree chargers. I think this is gorgeous, and the blue on the plate also matches the blue pumpkin that is in the ribbon. So I grabbed my Gorilla Glue gel and I attached it to the bootay of this glass. Let me stop with all that. I put the charger on it, and then I shoved some fairy lights and a couple little fall pieces in the bottom for just a little extra added accent, and I love how this turned out. For these glass tabletop decor pieces, we're going to use some of my TDS Decoupage paper, and I'm just going to cut cute little pumpkins out to frame inside of these adorable little things that you can pick up from Dollar Tree. Now be careful because the glass is so flippin' fragile, people. It is so fragile. So be careful whenever you're using these pieces from Dollar Tree. Unfortunately, it is also not that easy to get these little pieces off. So I was even nervous doing this that I was going to break the glass. Typically, I like to either tear or use some water to trace around our design whenever I'm doing some sort of decoupage. But since this is going to be a very precise design, I completely cut out around the outline of our pieces. Well, I mean, I did the best I could because it was a little bit of a struggle getting around those florally bits on the pumpkin. For the medium, we're going to be using some of the Deco Art decoupage in the mat, and I just flipped this tissue paper upside down and traced around the whole inside of our piece. That's another reason that this paper is so awesome. It's not as thin as a napkin, so doing something like this, you're not going to have a huge issue with tearing, and it allows you to place it on a surface without having a ton of Mod Podge seep around the outside, leaving a bunch of smudgy marks. This idea, if you do not want to use decoupage paper, you could absolutely use a napkin, you could use stickers, you could use transfers. The idea is very remixable. Take it and do what you want with it. For those of you that are in love with the prints, I promise I am restocking each month. I am just waiting on the vendors to give me the merchandise, and as soon as I have the prints, I will always let you know when everything's back in stock. We're going to need 3 different size and completely different pieces of glass for this next project, and one that we can make look like a pumpkin. And we're going to need to use that lid, so I'm just unscrewing it, and then I'm painting it a little bit of a mix of a black and a brown. And you can do what you want, but a little tip, use some chalk paint. Acrylic paint is probably going to pop right off that metal. And no, people, we are not going to be painting this. Instead, we're going to grab some things to fill the jar that resemble colors of a pumpkin. So I'm just taking some orange little bits, I'm taking some potpourri and some mesh, and I'm going to layer it inside the jar. And layer it however you want. There was really no rhyme or reason to this madness. I just put it in spots where I feel like you could see the different colors from all angles of the jar. I also want to do the vases completely different. So for one of them, I'm going to use some burlap, and I'm just cutting a little strip off. If you got ribbon, use that. And I'm going to use a little piece of this nautical jute rope. If you want to use twine, by all means. I'm actually unraveling this so I can use the thinner piece. And then we're going to wrap our little piece of burlap around here. You can glue it on here. I recommend tacky glue if you want to adhere fabric onto glass. It works super well. And then we're going to make a wonky knot. And what I mean by that is we're going to tie it once, and then we're gonna tie it again, kind of leaving a decent gap in the center, and then the extra bits on the end are kind of just gonna be flailed to the side. I'm not really sure what anybody else calls them, but that's what I'm calling them. I see them in the store from time to time with their little decor piece. I'm like, I can make that. Now we're gonna take this little leaf, and you can take whatever you want to pop in here, but I'm going to take this little leaf and a little bit of glue and plop it right inside of our hole. I thought putting a little pearl in there, a little gem, putting a little, they even have like little mirrors, you got little floral pieces. There's all kinds of things you could pop right in the middle of this all year long to just jazz up a little decor piece in your home. But it's fall themed. Okay, it's fall themed. Look, here's me adjusting my wonky edges. But I love how that turned out. It was super simple to do. Our last one's going to be even easier. We're just going to need a thin little piece of twine or two, how many ever you want to use. We're going to tie it in a knot. And then we're going to grab us some beads and pop right on the edges. What I love about projects like this with these two glass vases is we're really just adding some easy accents. If you don't want to glue anything onto these, you don't have to. And you can interchange these out all year long to match with your decor. People, now I want to share a little hack with y'all. I'm not sure about your house and your floral situation, but mine will look like this. I'll have pieces cut up and they are just too short and they don't fit. And I'm like, oh, I gotta buy more florals, or do I? I grab a dowel and then I measure it to size inside the piece, especially if you like the floral pieces that you have and you just feel like they're going to go with whatever it is that you're creating. You can then attach them to the top of the dowel or in the center of the dowel, wherever you want. Take some washi tape that is the color theme that you're going to be using. So this way, when you're looking through the clear glass, it's all one color and it all makes sense. So as you can see here, the top of my florals are that like burgundy brown, and my washi tape kind of matches. And then you just go all the way down your little dowel straight to the bottom with the washi tape, covering up the fact that none of it actually goes together. And I've shared this in my content before that my mom used to work at a warehouse that created wreaths and floral pieces for companies like Macy's and JCPenney's back in the day. And I learned this little trick from her. So in case you haven't seen this $1 mall stuff from Target's Bullseye Playground, let me share it with you, okay? And yeah, it is messy, but you're just going to take a little bit and stuff it on down in there. You can really use whatever you want. It kind of just hides the bottom of our dowel. Next, grab you a cork of some sort. I'm taking this little wood piece here and then 2 green leaves and attaching it to the back, popping out the sides. And then we're going to take our lid that is completely dry, put a little dollop on the center here of glue, whatever kind of glue you want, probably a little bit better than the hot glue that I'm just using for the video. And I'm keeping this. This is actually my centerpiece this year. Love how this turned out. Plop that little piece right on top, and we have us a little pumpkin with 2 accented glass pieces to go with it. Dollar Tree glass bowls are so meant for something more than just shoving some food in there. Like to attach them to these little plastic pieces for no real apparent reason. But really the best reason, because I had a napkin that matched it. And I was like, oh, we're going to decoupage this bowl and attach it onto the top of our little LED pillar candle. But I didn't like the color of the candle. And then I'm like, how am I going to turn the light on and off if I attach the bottom? And then there's these little pegs up here. I'm like, we're going to have to figure this out. So, of course, I used all the best practices. I mean, why wouldn't you beat it with a pair of wire cutters? And then I'm like, okay, I don't need to do that because there are these little pegs inside of the candle actually holding this in place, right? So I just snip them suckers right on out of there. Right? No, wrong. Even after I nipped the little tip of them suckers off, it was still kind of glued in there. So one more bang with the wire cutters, and then I can't even hold on to it. Ta-da! Yeah, now it's out of there. Now what, right? Now we just put that sucker off to the side. But not before I had a small candlelight vigil for myself. I don't know what I was doing here. Okay, now down to business, right? Time to get everything glued, decoupaged up. No, I still spent time trying to figure this out. I'm like, the candle doesn't fit in here. What am I going to do? I want the candle to be able to go on the bottom. And I'm like, these little bits are going to stop my bowl from attaching. So we got to get rid of them little nips just poking out right there. So they got to go. So I took the wire cutters and just kind of pop them suckers right off to the side. So the bottom of this would be nice and flat, and we can glue this to the bottom of the bowl and use the top to put in a candle pillar or some fairy lights or whatever. Took me a minute, but I finally figured it out. You're welcome, people. You're welcome. Now look how beautifully this bowl sits on our piece here. Look at this pillar we are creating for our decoupage decor piece that no one asked us to make, but we just felt compelled to do it. Okay, we're going to take some greens. We're going to mix them together, and you want to definitely make sure you got a chalk paint in there because acrylic's just not going to stick to plastic that well, especially shiny plastic. And you could honestly give this a little sanding if you want. I'm taking a little sponge and just tapping all over this sucker. And this took 3 coats to get a good coverage. And no, I didn't worry about doing the inside. Now while that's drying, because I don't know about you, but I'm tired of looking at that LED piece, it is time to get to business with the decoupage. One of the easiest ways to get those sneaky layers off the top decorative layer is to just find a corner and peel a little section. It will reveal the layers underneath the top decorative layer. You could always use 2 pieces of tape on the end as well and pull them apart, or a little bit of Mod Podge in between your pointer finger and your thumb, and then bloop, 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 the edge will also get the ends off. Lots of good little tips to get them sneaky layers off, but you want to make sure you're just using the top layer of your napkin. To apply our napkin, I'm just going to use some of this Deco Art Decoupage in the mat and a fan brush. And so I have a stable surface to kind of, well, not really stable, but you could put a piece of painter's tape on the top of your little bottle. It'll be a little bit more stable. I'm going to use this other Mod Podge bottle to flip the bowl upside down so I can put our little tears of our napkin in different sections of the bowl. I did tear the napkin off camera, and I made sure to keep all the sunflowers whole. So this way, as I'm going around the bowl with the napkin sections, I can meet up with the last section that I attached and make the entire design look like one piece instead of overlapped sections of napkin, which is a little trick whenever you're decoupaging something and you want the design to just look unison. Try not to overlap the designs. Try to make it look like they connect. I'm taking a dry sponge here and I am just tapping on the top. Whenever you're doing glass, it's not very porous, so the medium will come up through the pores in your napkin, and that can create bubbling, it can create wrinkling, it can create tearing. However, whenever you use a sponge, it actually grabs the medium that comes through the napkin. When I got to the edge of where I was applying the first section, I made sure to go over the end section with the medium and attach the ends down really well. And once they were applied, I then took a little bit of medium right over the edge of the napkin. So this way, the next napkin that I have torn up, I can meet right up on the edge and gently lay it right over the first napkin. So this way it looks like it's connected. I hope that makes sense. And this really just gives the appearance that your bowl is one full design instead of a bunch of cut up little designs. But you decoupage your napkin on here however you want. And this is also really cute if you want to use several different designs. You can make it like a patch type of design. I let this dry completely overnight, and I'm just kind of sharing here with you guys so you can see how the design on our bowl is not overlapping. Like I was telling you, it's like a design versus little sections. I just really wanted to show it to you in its entirety. And I know there are a couple of little wrinkles. I wasn't going for perfect here, so anybody that's got a comment about that, you just keep your comment to yourself. I'm tearing the extras off of our top here, get those little crusty bits off, and then we're going to take some painter's tape and create a rim around our bowl. I get asked a ton of questions about layering paints and napkins and all the things, and here we're going to layer some chalk paint around the top of our bowl to create a rimmed design. And people, don't start me lying, I did pop some of that acrylic paint in there to give us the same color that we had on our LED lights, and I went slightly inside of the bowl. If you want to cover the whole inside of the bowl, you go right ahead. But I wanted lights to be able to shine through our napkin here once this was completely dry for our decorative piece. And no, I did not seal over this napkin before I applied the painter's tape. This actual application is just from the one that we did underneath the napkin. It dries super, super well. I'm going to put our finishing sealer over when we're all done. Just make sure that your napkin is on there extremely well before you go putting painter's tape over it. Otherwise, that napkin's going to peel off of anything that you're pulling the painter's tape from. I took some glossy Mod Podge to seal both of these pieces up together, and I love how this piece turned out. I love that the lights shine through our little bowl. I put some more lights, of course, in our little LED piece here. Add as much or as little as y'all want to this piece, or no lights at all inside of the bowl shining through. It's just a different little decoupage idea that, you know, I just had to toss in here. These little salt and pepper shakers are super darling. I wanted to recreate these, but using Dollar Tree's what I like to call Parmesan cheese shakers. Let me know in the comments below what you call these. We're going to remove the lid because we're not going to need that, along with the tag on the bottom. I'm choosing to go with a white color instead of the teal color in the original piece. I'm just switching it up according to what's working for me with my decor. Make sure whatever paint you're using works well with glass, and it's always a good idea to make sure your glass is clean and you wear some gloves. I'm keeping this so I'm not too worried about any issues with separation with the paint or getting fingerprints on it. And feel free to paint the bottom. I always have people ask if you paint the bottom. Paint as much of your pieces as you want, my friends. Sometimes I don't, just to save time, but it doesn't hurt to paint the bottom. And yes, seal over it if you want. You could throw some Mod Podge over this. You could spray it with a spray paint. A clear coat Rust-Oleum would work as well. I took some twine and wrapped it around this sucker a couple times, tied a little piece, and then cut off any extra, adding an adorable flower right to the side. Next time you're in Dollar Tree, people, check out their vinyl section. They're now carrying frosted window film. They have a few different designs. I was lucky enough to pick up 2 at my local Dollar Tree, and for $1.25, you're getting a lot. Sometimes I'm lucky enough to find glass decor plates for a couple cents at the thrift stores. But if I can't, Dollar Tree always has these for $1.25, and glass plates can make beautiful home decor. I cut me down a little sliver, just big enough to fit over the back of this plate here, and I'm taking a little orange colored pencil just to trace around where the center circle is of the plate. Obviously, you do this however works best for you. For me, I felt like just flipping over our vinyl piece, since the backing is easy to write on, it would make the most sense for me to draw on here and then cut out the extra so it fit perfectly right in the center here. It's super easy to remove from the backing, and don't worry if you cut this a little bit too big. I'm gonna show you how to fix that and trim it up. Now, if you cut it too short, you're gonna have to just make a whole new piece. I'm sorry, I can't help you any further than that. For the application here, you're going to notice that I'm grabbing a little Cricut tool. And that's because as I was messing with this film, making this video, I realized that if I was just using my fingers, the film, it was just coming right off. In an effort to save you the struggling at home using this to DIY with, please grab yourself something to actually scrape the back of the film for whatever you're applying this to. I could tell you it's easy, it's wonderful, it's beautiful, carry on with my video, get some views, but that's not going to benefit you. The directions on the box do recommend spraying a little bit of water on the glass surface, which is completely typical for using a film on a window if you've never done this before. But through trial and error, I found that using a little scraper tool on wood, plastic, or glass, it actually helped it stick pretty good without water. For this little bit of excess, I grabbed my X-Acto knife and just gingerly cut along the circle. This stuff trimmed super easy. Just be careful with your fingers, especially if you're doing it around something like this. It can be a little scary. I'm a huge fan of frosted glass. This is kind of a game changer for me. Absolutely love how this turned out, and it's super easy to add things to. You can take Dollar Tree wall decals, you can grab some transfers, plop them in the center, do a stencil. I've definitely done stencils before, even decoupage a design on the center, and you have a beautiful high-end looking home decor piece. Remix this idea using any size frames and any kind of frames you would like. I am taking these Dollar Tree 5x7s and removing the glass piece so we can attach the Dollar Tree frosted window film right onto them. And people, be careful because these Dollar Tree glass pieces are a little fragile, okay? If you've never worked with them before, be careful. I'm using a color pencil to trace on the back of the frosted window film the size that we need to cut out to fit on the piece of glass. It is really important to use a scraping tool whenever you're applying this to make sure that it adheres really well and that this film isn't going to come back off. However, you want to be extremely ginger doing that with these Dollar Tree glass frame pieces, because the glass, I have broken at least a dozen or more of these just by staring at them. I'm sorry. But look how pretty these turned out. So pretty. And you can obviously do this to as many frames as you would like and create as many different types of wall decor pieces in your home. Love this idea. For the design, I'm using these little anchor glass stickers that Dollar Tree carries. Obviously, use whatever you want to put in the center. Want it to keep it white to match with the frame. And you can plop colors in here. You could use a stencil for this. You could use a little decoupage paper or a napkin to put in the center here. Whatever design that you would like to stand out and be your focal point of your decor piece. Just wanted to use the anchors today, and I feel like these turned out so high-end looking. If you want to hang them on the wall, make sure that you add a little hanger in the back. I did take some tacky glue to the corners and around with a paintbrush. So this way, once I sat the frame in here, we wouldn't have the tiny little black hooks popping around the corner holding onto the glass, that they would just be kind of sitting in here with some glue. I ensured the hold with a little bit of hot glue as well. And I chose to stage these up like some tabletop decor. These hurricane vases you can grab from Dollar Tree are probably one of the most versatile pieces of glass that you can grab from there and turn them really into anything, especially a high-end decor piece, which is exactly what we're going to do using this Dollar Tree frosted window film. It's easy enough to measure around the glass and cut it down to size. And then any trimming you have to do, you can do with an X-Acto knife after, which you'll see me share with you at the end. I made sure where the film met around our little hurricane vase that there was a smidge of an overhang, not a whole lot. And as I was applying the film, I kept the backing on the excess that wasn't attached to our hurricane vase. So this way, the film didn't start attaching to anything else. And I'm about to be 100% real with y'all. This was my second take on this vase because my first take, I decided to pull the backing off and then just apply it with my hands instead of using this little scraper. And guess what? It didn't stick. Even though the directions on the box recommend using water, I found that just using the scraping tool will help this film stick really well to what you're applying it to. Just be mindful of the pressure that you're using with whatever surface you're attaching it to so you don't break anything. And just a heads up, while the footage may fool you into thinking this is super easy and it took me a couple minutes, it took me over 20 minutes to actually apply the film, making sure there were no bubbles and that this was attached on here really well. I took my X-Acto knife to the inner rim of the top of this hurricane jar. Vase, it's a vase. I keep saying jar and then editing it back out just to let y'all know what's going on behind the scenes here. I'm cracking up at myself. I'm like, stop it, Brandy. If I had $1 for every time I had to edit out hurricane jar in this section of the video, I'd be rich. Anyhow, we're just gonna roll on with the rest of this DIY because we are basically done. If you want to add a little bit of Mod Podge around the edges and where the seam meets, you go right ahead. That's just gonna ensure that this is gonna stick on here all that much better. I love how this turned out. It is so beautiful. On a recent trip to Dollar Tree, I found these beautiful candle holders. Now, they are completely high-end on their own. I mean, seriously, look how beautiful they are. But guess what? We can stack them fairly easily. And I'm like, oh, I definitely got some scrap wood in my stash that we can make some really cool high-end pieces with these. For our bond, I'm going to be using some Gorilla Glue gel. You could use E6000, that'll work too. I highly recommend using something other than just some hot glue. That never seems to hold glass on top of glass or together at all for glass for me. So I like using something else. For the paint, we're going to be using some of this. Now use whatever paint you want. It's in my experience with glass, chalk paint or a clay chalk paint or a multi-surface works best to get some really good solid coverage quickly. You do you. And I also like using a pouncer and tappity tap tap tapping the paint on that sucker versus a brush, again, with glass. You do you. It might seem a little textury at first, but that's usually okay. Most paints, at least the ones in my experience, especially this, it levels itself out. And here you might be like, Brandy, why are you using a pouncer on this wood? There's no real reason why I'm using the pouncer. Use a brush if you want. The wood is really rustic and it is not sanded down. So using a brush is going to work just as effectively if you use my little tip with spritzing some water over the rough edges. Absolutely sand your wood down if you want. I do not want to sand this down. One, I'm cutting video time, and two, I like rustic things. You see, this is completely rough, and you can take the pouncer or a paintbrush. You will use extra paint doing this, trying to get in those rough edges. So sanding it down will help prevent that, but also using a little spritz of some water will really get in those rough edges. And then you just come on in with some paints and you are done in just a couple seconds. And do keep in mind that you choose to use a pouncer or a sponge, because I use a sponge sometimes when I paint too. It is possible working with rough edged wood, it could get stuck in the rough edges. So might be best if you want to avoid possibly have that happen to you, just use a paintbrush. Once all the pieces were completely dry, I glued everything together and absolutely love how this high-end piece turned out. I think it's safe to say that we all have some mason jars laying around in our glassware stash. A super easy way to DIY these on up is to add some rub-on transfers. For anyone who's interested, these transfers can be found at thediystruggle.com. They are called Harmony. They are from my own creative brand TDS, which stands for the DIY Struggle, in case anyone is interested. Now, mind the fact that this is already cut to bits. As you can tell, I'm loving these and have been using them. I think I'm on my second sheet already. I'm just cutting out a couple different sections, and you can use any transfers you want from any line you want, any style you want. Get creative with this. You don't even have to paint the glass. Well, some people might need to put a layer of Mod Podge or even use some Rust-Oleum matte to give a first coat before they apply the transfers. Depending on how sticky they are, they may not just stick to the glass on their own. I do not have that issue with these. I know they're going right on the glass, so I don't bother to prep them with Mod Podge or a sealer. But you do whatever you think is going to work best for your glassware decor at home. And as you can see, I do have some gloves on to protect the glass from getting any oil before I'm putting this transfer on here. Look how beautiful that turned out. Super easy. It literally took me less than 5 minutes to put these on the glass. You can seal over these if you want using some Mod Podge or Rust-Oleum matte spray paints. They seal just fine. And right here you can see I'm just using my fingers to push on this transfer, and it's already sticking in the section that curves right here without using this little plastic card. Super easy to attach to glass. Finish up your piece with whatever accents you want. I'm just using a little piece of ribbon, and I popped the finger bow on here, some greenery. This would also look really cute with some fairy lights shining through. This is such a super easy way to transform those mason jars you have sitting around in your stash. We're about to get super crafty with these two glass bottles right here. Now, mind the condensation still inside the bottle. They were not completely dried out the next day, but we got a craft. So we're just going to roll on using some of this Mod Podge to get a nice layer just on most of the bottom of the bottle. Well, you could really do this to the whole bottle if you want. It just depends on the look that you're going for. I want the top of the bottle to be crystal clear. When it's dry, it's going to look like this. You will see that part of it is kind of froggy, kind of foggy, not froggy, foggy, and the top is crystal clear. To create our raised stencil effect, I'm going to be using some of this Tim Holtz texture paste. There is a link down in my Amazon affiliate link down in the description box for anyone interested, and grab a stencil. Any stencil will do for this, preferably ones that will stick to a surface, but in case they don't, there's always some painter's tape, people. And if the stencil goes completely around your project, that's a win-win too. Mine didn't, so I'm gonna have to come back in and do another layer once this is dry. I'm using a little fancy schmancy spreader tool. People, you do not have to break the bank for this, okay? If you got a plastic spoon, that will work as well. You can use a popsicle stick. It literally does not matter. You don't have to break the bank for this, okay? We're just spreading some texture paste across some glass. The reason why we put the layer Mod Podge on here is so that way we already had a little bit of a tacky surface, so this medium had something to grab onto. It's been my experience that just putting this on glass alone is not enough to hold it in place. When you're happy with it, go ahead and pull the stencil off. If it goes all the way around and stick into the glass, you're not going to have to come back in once this dries and do the spots that it didn't cover. You will just be able to go to the next part, which is the paint. For the paint, I'm going to be using the color Mermaid Tail by DIY. For anyone interested, my girl Sammy over at Unicorn Dust Design sells this, and I usually keep a link down in the description box. I'm taking a pouncer and just tapping this paint all over the part of our bottle that we have the dry stencil on. Definitely make sure the stencil is dry before you do this. Now we're going to take a paintbrush and we're going to go right around the top. This is just going to be right over the stencil. You can absolutely tape this section off if you don't have a steady hand or you think that the line might be messy. I just used a paintbrush. You do you. Absolutely leave these how they are. They're super beautiful, just like this, all in their own, but I'm a little extra. So we're going to take some of Dixie Belle's gilding wax just on our finger and go right over those raised edges. If you don't have any Dixie Belle gold gilding wax, no worry, you can use paint and do the same thing. Just put a little bit of paint on the tip of your finger and go right over those raised edges where you have that stencil. Super pretty. I also put a little bit right around the top of the bottle. I paid $1.99 each for both of these little glass mugs, that's what I'm going to call them, from my local community aid store. And we're going to give them a nice cleaning first before we get to painting, just to make sure that we don't have any gooky stuff, and wear some gloves so we don't get fingerprints and, the oil from our skins on the glass between that and our, paint. It's going to make everything stick so much better. And I do want to add, be mindful the type of paint that you choose to use whenever you are painting glass. A lot of times on the back, it will tell you what the uses are for. And I preferably like to use chalk paint along with a multi-surface paint. Recently, I've discovered that works really, really well. Since these little glass pieces had a bunch of divots, I thought it would be a great idea to just take 3 different colors and kind of spread them out, alternating different little boxes. There really wasn't no rhyme or reason to the boxes that I chose for the colors I chose. I just wung it, really. Here is our first coat, and for the second coat, I am going the opposite direction that I painted the first coat. This is just going to give us a better coverage. I applied 2 full coats to this, let them dry, and then came on in with our white chalk paint. I went around the edge and around the top and around the handle, very heavy, and did 3 layers of the white chalk paint. Once the edges were pretty much dry, I came on in with a Chippy brush and I loaded a little bit of paint on it and then offloaded it to be able to do a dry brushing. And I'm just going to go up from the top or down from the top and up from the back and forth. I went back and forth between the top and the bottom, covering over our little gaps that we had going on here. And this is really just tying the whole piece together so it don't look like we have a bunch of little splotchy color pieces everywhere. The white just brings it all together. We're going to take some of this Dixie Belle gilding wax. If you do not have this, you could use a shiny colored paint. That would work as well. I'm putting a little on my finger and just going over all the little raised sections, the handle, and I am leaving the top part white. Love how these little pieces came out, and I filled them with some Dollar Tree florals and some of that Dollar Tree mesh I really like. I just say that it's not often I find a piece of glass and I'm like, I need to turn that into a candle. But that's how I felt about these pieces. I grabbed them for $1.99 a piece at my local community aid store, and I just knew that they would go perfect with my color scheme we had going on for this video. And for my ASMR lovers, I got your back. People, look how pretty these turned out. I'm so happy with these. I love the color. It's gorgeous. Now let's bring in our soy wax. This was sent to me by a subscriber. Thank you so much, Rhonda. I actually really loved this stuff. She has heard me mention before in my contents that I'm really eco-friendly with stuff like that, especially burning things in my house. And she wanted me to try this wax out, and I absolutely love it. These little things I'm chopping up right here are just some branch bits I picked up in a bag. I don't know how to describe it. From Dollar Tree, branch bits, okay? And we're just snipping up some little pieces. You could use potpourri if you want. I'm just kind of throwing something in the top of the candle because we're going to melt this wax in a really unconventional way. The wicks I'm using are hemp, and I ordered them off of Amazon in case anyone's wondering, and I'm just using some hot glue to glue these down. Now this DIY is purely aesthetic. I do not plan on burning these. And no, I am not sure that burning anything and something you spray painted is a good idea, for those that are going to ask in the comments. And before you start judging me because you just see me pouring this out, okay, we're not melting it. I want it to be clumpy. I want this to have a texture. I want these to look like bubbles, like in a little champagne. Listen, okay, this was the look I was going for. Stop judging me. I feel it. You melt your wax how you want to, okay? When you're happy with how much wax you have put in here, just, you know, nip the tips of those wicks off to the size that makes sense for you. You could leave them as long as you want, but I wanted mine a little bit shorter. And now I'm just putting some of them bits in here. I wish I had some colored potpourri to make it a little bit more colorful, and I didn't. So this was where I was going with this. I wanted this to kind of look like champagne with fruit in the top, little bits, and that just didn't turn out necessarily, okay? When I was happy with that, I brought in our heat gun, because here's how we're going to melt our wax and make it look like there's bubbles on top. You're just going to gently hover the heat gun at a safe distance away from your wax. And be mindful that the wax is going to come flying out of your champagne glasses, okay? And it's going to go where it wants, including sticking to the side of your glass pieces and your fingers and all the things. And it's not really a big deal. However, it is kind of fun. Really had a good time with this little DIY that I'm sharing with you guys. And I highly recommend you doing it, just because sometimes making a mess and creating things you've never done before is just therapeutic. It might not look like I have fruit in the top of there, but it does look like some bubbles, at least to me. I'm gonna have to redo this again. I just honestly had way too much fun melting that wax like that. I'm gonna definitely have to redo this at some point with a different DIY idea. This was just